Hey everybody, welcome back to the 100th episode of Taps and Patience. I am AJ with Audacity Micro, here with Harrison of Precision Ingenuity, Dylan from Within Tolerance and Protein Machining, and James from
Cerven
Solutions or Cerven Solutions. Hi guys, how you doing?
Not too
doing
bad.
Well.
It's been a day.
James, we've still been saying Cerven wrong, even though you
that's
corrected us like 79 episodes ago.
That's fine. It does not matter. We might be saying it wrong. Who knows?
So obviously this is a little bit of a special occasion for us since this is our 100th episode. So we got back on some previous guests. Notably, Cerven Solutions, James, and your brother it was just you, were like our first kind of bigger episode. And then also you were our second big episode. And then Dylan was our third big episode. So we have all the heavy hitters here. And I think, actually, I haven't checked the stats, but I think Zap's episode has been maybe our biggest to date so far. But I suspect this will blow that one out of the water.
Well, congrats to you both. 100 episodes is big.
That is quite persistent. I would not have lasted that long.
Which means I think we, at some point, missed our 2-year anniversary. I don't remember when we started, but we've definitely skipped more than 4 episodes. So
I think it was back in August of 2 years ago.
Okay.
August
so
or
we're like
September.
Several months too late on our 2-year anniversary.
Yeah. Time flies. Time flies.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does.
When we started this podcast, I think I only had one machine. So
And it was a Tormach.
It was a Tormach. So it's pretty wild.
To close that loop a little bit, I just got an email, like right as we were setting everything up, where my Tormach is officially in the mail. Well, not in the mail, but you know what I mean. It's on the way. It's on a truck.
You got a 1500?
I have a 1500 MX on the way.
Nice.
That's exciting. So is that tomorrow then or Wednesday? Because you're pretty close. I mean, close enough that you drove up.
It doesn't have the expected delivery date yet. It could be tomorrow. It may sit at a warehouse here in Indiana before coming to me, like, the day after tomorrow or something. I should find out. Hopefully their tracking number will update here in a second and give me all the details, because I believe I do need a forklift to get it off. So,
right, because you rented one for your OM, right?
Yes.
Did you rent a forklift or how, is that how you got it down there?
Yes, for the OM.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's very...
Go ahead.
Say, both machines are very pallet jackable once they're off the truck. But the last I heard, the 1500s, they were built around the liftgate requirements for the carrier that they used. And then the truck drivers started getting a little bit nervous because they were like right at the limit. And, liftgates get worn out over time and stuff. And they didn't want to take the liability of dropping a machine off the end. And so they, I think, have been looking for a different carrier that will actually do the liftgate deliveries on the 1500s.
What's it weigh? Like 3,000 pounds?
It's in that ballpark.
Okay. That's not bad. That's nice.
Yeah.
Seemed like a pretty decent sized machine. I saw it at IMTS. I felt bad because when we checked it out one of the mornings, so like we were getting in early because we had the shiny stickers, and they were like replacing the spindle on it because the night before, like a pull stud snapped or something, and it took out the whole spindle. So, and then like that night they had the panels off, and the cleaning crew threw out a bunch of panels. So they were just having a horrible start to IMTS. I felt so bad for them.
Wait, you were at IMTS?
Yeah.
I didn't get to meet you there.
Yeah, I didn't get to see you.
I think there was a lot of people that I just forgot to meet. And like I got back and I was like, dang it. I was really just kind of focused more on like finding customers and also trying not to like get sucked into spending way too much money. So it was a bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah.
So I think I saw you. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think I saw James like 3 or 4 times before we actually said hello because we were just both
We just kept floating
passing
around
each other and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I got to see you once. I don't think I even like walked by you, at least when I was paying attention.
I think Sean was like, I saw a guy in an orange shirt with curly hair. I think it was AJ. And I was like, yeah, it probably was.
All right, but James, so if I remember right, I had like done like pre-podcast, I had recorded a video with you, and then a couple weeks or it would have been a couple months after that, we did our first podcast episode. And in that gap, you had doubled in size. Then we recorded another podcast episode with you like 6 months later, and you guys had like doubled in size again. So where's your company at now?
I'd say the doubling hasn't kept up because that would have been very unsustainable. But I was trying to think before this when I was last on. Do you remember when it was?
I don't think you had two
so
robo
flies.
drills.
Yeah, I believe you were a single robo drill and like getting rid of the sile.
Okay. Yeah, so when we got that, we had a bunch of issues, obviously. I explained this last time with the first robo drill with the missing column riser. So that was giving us a bad taste in our mouth. But finally, once it was resolved and like the robo drill was up and running, we were like, okay, this machine is like leagues better than the sill, which is understandable because it costs 4 times as much. So we were like, well, we've got the work, so let's replace that second sill. So pretty much like 2 weeks after we started running the first robo drill, we I think got a PO on the second one, and then that came pretty quickly. They were like, well, so the sales guy told us they were overstocked in Massachusetts, so there was a discount. But I don't ever believe the sales guy's discounts. I just don't trust that stuff. So either way, it was a good enough price for us to snag it. So that one started as a 3-axis, and then at the end of last year, kind of like tax reasons, we were like, okay, let's spend some money. Arguably, we probably should have kept the cash on hand, but we ended up getting a Pseudocoma for that 3-axis robo drill, like a step up from the other Pseudocoma. So it's like a more accurate, more rigid, and faster one. And then on the other robo drill, we added a UR robot. And then also right around the same time, we added a Datron Neo. So, and then we also added a Zeiss Duramax. And then that's kind of where we're at now. And we've just been chugging along. And then besides that, just like investing in a lot of new tooling, a lot of fixturing, like a lot of new carbide, I guess, like different new brands and different stuff. So that stuff costs a shocking amount when you start investing in it, like pretty much as a machine at some point. So yeah, we've just been blowing a lot of money and trying to make more than we spend, but it's been going well.
And is it just you and your brother at this point?
Yeah, it's just us right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had an employee, but that was a whole. It wasn't dramatic, but like it didn't end well. Well, I guess it didn't really end well. It just didn't end up working out. So we kind of just went back to the drawing board and trying to get more prepared for the next time we're ready to hire. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, hiring someone is not something to be taken lightly. You got to be,
yeah, for sure.
Especially like, I don't know, talking to this crowd, probably none of you have ever really been managers of anyone outside of the machining world. Have any of you ever been like a manager outside, at some other job?
Mm-mm.
Yep,
No,
I have.
I was like sort of in charge of a couple guys at my last job, which was a joke because I was like 18 and they were in desperate need. But that just tells you how bad their situation was. But that didn't last long. It wasn't much of anything, so no.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A, I had like 60 people working for me.
Oh man,
Damn.
How many people work at a Chick-fil-A?
So the one we were at was a kind of a medium sized Chick-fil-A,
Let's see if I can
and it was about 150 people. That being said, many of those people were like 14-year-olds that would only work for maybe 8 hours a week. So when you need like 30 or 40 people to run the business at any given time, and you only have people who are working 4 hours a week, like it takes a lot of people.
Yeah,
I didn't really think about how few hours that many people worked. It's kind of crazy.
I imagine that's a good lesson and good process then, because like there's no way somebody working 4 hours a week could have any kind of mastery over a job.
Yeah, I feel like fast food is probably a pretty good way of getting ideas for training people, because you need someone in there like super fast and you're expecting them not to last long, and the turnover, or what's it called, like churn, I think, is probably crazy high for fast food. So the training processes are definitely something. Good.
At Chick-fil-A, it was actually a lot better than most restaurants. And the 14-year-olds who only worked 4 hours a week or whatever, they would actually stay around a lot longer than like the adults that are coming in for 40 hours.
That makes
Um,
sense. They're probably just doing that from like 10th grade to finishing college or something.
Yes, exactly. So we had a lot of people that were like, 22 and they had been in the company for 4 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and Chick-fil-A pays pretty well in comparison to a lot of jobs that you can get at, 15, 16 years old, from what I remember at least.
For sure.
So Dylan, what about you in your shop?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think last time I was on, we had just got the Hermla or just ordered it. I can't remember.
I don't think you had it yet.
I don't think you had it yet, yeah.
Okay, maybe I just decided to buy it. But anyway, we added the C250 in February, and they've just been crazy busy all year, which has been great. And then, just before IMTS bought the U500, and then just after IMTS bought an auto bandsaw. And so the U500 is installed, and we're just getting it kind of up and running in terms of workflow and fusion and dialing in the center of rotation and all that stuff. So I don't really have like a good update on that quite yet. Like it's a cool machine. Like it's really interesting because I have one of every generation of Speedio, and you can tell even in like X1 to X2 and then X2 to XD1 the little changes that they've made. Like the servos are much quieter, the machine is much quieter overall, everything feels a little bit more quality. I mean, there's some things on the new D0 control that I don't like nearly as much too. Like the I think I've talked about it on my podcast a few times, that like you can use on the C0 controls the door as like a pause button. You can just open it and it like stops everything immediately. And on the D0 there's like two keys you have to flip, and you feel like you're launching a nuke every time you're going from like program run to handle jog. But overall I think it's a much more powerful control, and I'm excited to get some parts running. We really need it.
So, just out of curiosity, you're more of like a prototype shop than a production shop, correct?
Yeah.
So then, what are you gonna auto bandsaw like a bunch of parts for? Like, what's your highest quantity that you're gonna cut with that?
Oh, like 2 or 3. But it's the fact that it'll be consistent stock, and we can keep 10 different types of cuts in there. We can have aluminum presets, steel, all that stuff. And so it's more about being able to cut 1 or 2 pieces very accurately, turn around, stamp them, drop them in a machine, and then like, okay, the next job needs 3 pieces of 316, and then you just throw that in there, have it cut again, stamp it, throw in the machine. And so it's less like production cutting and more just like right now we have a manual metal devil saw. And so, stainless steel blades last like 50 cuts maybe before they start dulling and burning up. And then aluminum, anything over about 1.5 or 2 inches, it starts really trying to chunk out material. Like it'll start grabbing material between the teeth and just becomes a pain. And it's just been a pain point. And then anytime we have any serious stainless to cut, Brad goes to his old job and uses their saw, which is 30 minutes from the shop. It's kind of on his way in, which is nice, but we just needed some way to do it right.
And so you just jump to the biggest you could get in there, kind of a deal.
It was really the cost. Like we were looking at Dual's 260.
Oh, okay.
I think they're Continental because that's what they have at Brad's old job. But that thing's like starts at 40 grand, I think. And
Dang.
the JLH is bigger. It's a 320 millimeter, and it was 26 delivered, I want to say.
Gotcha.
So like a significant chunk of change. If it was like a few grand here or there, we would have bought the brand name. But for 40% more money, it was not worth spending 40% more for less capacity.
That makes sense.
You probably wouldn't even notice that brand name difference unless you were actually cutting like 1,000 pieces anyway. So
right.
Yeah.
It'll probably be just fine.
Yeah, well, it's wild. The RAM on the Dual has to be half the size of the one on the JLH, if not smaller. Like the ram on the JLH, it's a single ram, but it's one of the biggest I've seen on a
What's a
vertical.
ram on a
Like
bandsaw?
the hydraulic ram that actually lifts the whole thing up and
Okay.
down. It is, I mean, it's got to be 10 inches in diameter or something. It's
Dang.
chunky. Yeah.
What's like the max diameter bar you could cut on it?
320 millimeters, which is what, 12 point something
Yeah,
inches?
that's quite big. Wow.
Yeah.
It's massive.
Yeah, it'll be nice because I can cut 12-inch fixture plate, which will be great.
Yeah.
See, I want a saw like that, except I want it to be like an 8-inch.
Yeah.
Because like anything bigger than that, I don't really need, or I'll get cut at the place that's providing the material. And I just that much space, it's going to take up so much space. I want one of those, but it's going to take up so much space.
We got a hide mech at the end of the year last year, and we've been really happy with it. And I think it cuts about like 10-inch max probably. It's not an auto saw, but it was like 12 or 13 grand, I think, and we like it. So maybe you could look at something like that.
But I do want the auto saw too, because I am getting into the production of like thousands of parts, and I can order it pre-cut. But I could also I could saw cut it myself if I had it. And I have enough runs where I'm doing like 50 pieces that like it's too expensive to get it saw cut like that to order it pre-sawed, and it'd be much easier and much nicer just to have an auto saw, which is why the Tormach bandsaw, now that AJ's been playing around with it, is kind of coming back into the picture.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess like the way I was looking at that was like, and our shop is really starting to get pretty crammed, so I can make more money with a machine in the place of a larger saw. So it's cheaper for us to get it pre-cut. But I mean, if you have the space, might as well. So it's just different per shop, I guess.
Yeah, like I have plenty of room. I have tons of room in my shop. Like I'm still considering building a wall to cut my shop in half to kind of make it a little bit smaller so it's easier to heat and cool.
That's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's something that no one has ever said. I want a smaller shop.
That's a unique problem.
Yeah, right? I got to blow this wall out behind me.
I have the part that I work in very condensed down, and it's like very tight. I don't have to walk very far. It gets a fairly efficient little space. And then the other half of my shop just collects junk.
I think
that is the problem with empty space.
My offcut pieces would be like a lifetime supply of material for AJ.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. No, like the auto part of it for us was mainly just consistency, because like those saws typically hold plus or minus 5 thou, if not under. Like the one that at Brad's work is very regularly 3 thou or under. And I think we've all, cut a piece of stock too large and taken that first adaptive pass and pulled it out of the vise or chipped an end mill or something stupid like that. And like, yeah, as we go to not automation, but more just being able to throw something in a machine that we know is good code and simulate it and run it, like that's
process reliability.
What we need to look at. Yeah, process reliability, exactly. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, it's not that hard to take too much of a cut in like 17.4. Like I was running some parts last week, and the first one gave me issues. I was like, screw that, and then I just like auto probed the rest of them. Because like you line it up the littlest bit wrong, and especially with the BT30, it's like it doesn't take much for a roughing pass to like be problematic. So
yeah, for sure.
Speaking of like process reliability, I had an interesting deal where I realized just how important tool holders were, and like it really makes me want Rigo fix. But I had a 1/4-inch end mill that broke for aluminum, or it didn't break. It was just worn out. So I switched it out, and by happenstance, it happened to be. Like normally when I probe the diameter of them, I'm usually off by at least 5/10 on my diameter in the ER collets. That's pretty standard. And this one, it just happened to be like perfect. Like it came in like 4 or 5/10 undersized. And so, I mean, I just measured the diameter. And so I'm just guessing that's about perfect for that particular tool. And I went and I took a cut, and I've always had to add in like a minimum of about 1 thou of wear comp to get it to cut on size. And this one I only had to add like 1/10, maybe 2, and it was like right on size. It blew me away. and like in the finish of it was like a mirror compared to everything else that I've been running. And so like it makes me really want to get Rego fixed like really bad. I'll be
Yeah.
curious on the tool life of that one too.
We've noticed a significant increase in tool life for sure. Like throwing
Yeah,
stuff
definitely.
in power grip, like it
Especially
just
on the small
works.
tools.
Yeah. Yeah, it's surprising. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. After seeing that one tool and like just being aware of it, because it was not long after IMTS. I think it was a week or two ago that happened. And it blew me away. I was just like, that is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like you couple that with very accurately ground tools too, and then yeah, you're barely comping. Like we, 3/10 is maybe the most I see, three or maybe 5/10 on some tools, but like we use Freza stuff and we use Destiny stuff, and Freza is H6 typically, and then Destiny I think is -1, -3/10 on their diameter grind for
Mm-hmm.
aluminum tools at least, and so it's right there. It really doesn't take much to get it to cut on size. You're just dealing with deflection at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I've had some larger tools that I've had to comp it as much as 3 thou to get it to cut on size. And
Jeez.
I'm sure those are just like not aligned at all with the holder.
I think that can also happen from like, was that like finishing passes and stuff? Because I've had the same kind of issue with like larger diameter Frasia finishers. And you'd think like a Frasia tool would cut right on size, but it just sometimes needs like a little more like a little more sensitivity when you're doing that finish cut. Maybe like a couple light passes or something, because the finishing tools aren't really like, they still do deflect a good amount. So that might just be what it is.
I have one tool. It's a 5/8 5 flute, and it's in an end mill holder, and it doesn't have as big a deflection as all the other larger diameter tools. All the other larger ones are probably in that 2 thou range of deflection, and that one tool is closer to about 1 thou, maybe 1 thou and a half. And it's one of the ones that's in an end mill holder. So I'm thinking that some of it is tool run out.
Totally, yeah. So speaking of deflection, AJ, how quickly are you going to send out your spindle once you get your new one in?
I'm going to wait until the new machine is proven reliable, but probably quickly
What happened to your
afterwards.
spindle?
It wasn't in great shape when it first came to me. That machine is old enough to drink. It's over 20 years old. But I'm pretty sure I made it worse too. So it's got some end play in it. It's still chugging along. I keep kind of lowering the max speed that I'll run the machine at. It's a 40K spindle, and ever since I got it, I've only been running it at 30K. But I've noticed my finishes even got a little bit worse. So now I've been maxing out at 25K. And if I do that, it still seems to do good enough, but I need to send that in for rebuild.
If it's anything like the Neo spindle, it's definitely more of like a disposable part of the machine. Like, I don't think those super high RPM spindles are really meant to have a crazy long life anyway.
Have you had any problems with your Neo spindle?
No issues with it yet, but we had like the yearly service guy out soon, and he was like, it doesn't have any issues, but like it's probably going to be in the next couple months. We've been using it a ton, so it probably makes sense just to get one on order, because like I think sometimes it's like a slow decrease, and that other times you're just like using it one day and it's like, yep, I'm done. So that could be problematic if we don't have one on hand. But yeah, it's been good so far. There's something that makes this weird, really loud, like grinding sound, and we thought it was a spindle, but it's not. It happens like once every week, like just some random sound, and we're still trying to figure it out. And like we'll run over, see what it is, and then it's gone. And we don't know what it is.
Is it maybe chips on the ways? Because I know that those, like, you're supposed to clean the ways pretty frequently and grease
so like
everything manually.
we would like try different things, and it was like, oh, it only happens when the spindle's spinning. And then it happened when the spindle wasn't spinning, and we're like, oh, it's only happening when the machine's moving. And then it happened when the machine's not moving. So it's like I think it's probably just a fan. There's got to be a fan in there somewhere with like a bad bearing in the fan. I think that's what it is, but I'm not sure yet. But yeah, it's been good so far.
I about had a heart attack the other day. I had replaced the belt, the pulley belt on my spindle. They break all the time on office mills. And when I put it back together, I think I somehow managed to not tighten one of the fan screws. And when I turned back on the machine after that, it like waits a minute and then turns on the fan, and it just started making this terrible racket, and I thought I had destroyed my machine.
That's probably what's going on. Yeah, I got to get in there and see if there's any fans that I haven't found yet.
Are you going to go through and tidy up all those cables, AJ, when you have the spindle out? I remember watching your video where you had to like literally bubble gum and tape a wire back together to get it like to work.
I probably should. It needs a bunch of work. I need to go through and confirm that all of the grease lines are working. I'm pretty sure that the oil line that goes to the spindle itself is clogged, because I haven't really seen the oil reservoir change at all in the last year of using the machine.
Yikes.
Which may have been the cause of death of the spindle originally. I'm not sure.
I was going to say that would cause a death of a spindle real quick.
Yeah.
I've also noticed it's a little bit louder on the far extent of the x-axis than it used to be. And so I'm kind of worried that that's a grease thing or a bearing thing. It could just be weight covers, but I don't know. It all just needs to be kind of torn down and cleaned out and spruced up a little bit.
Were they cutting ceramics on that before you got it?
They claimed that this machine only ever cut acrylic.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. With some of the other, even if it did only ever cut acrylic, all the other machines in the place were cutting ceramic, and so it could have sucked it in.
That's so sketchy. No way.
Yeah. Well, and acrylic doesn't create hard white dust that gets everywhere.
Yeah. So, but the backlash is good. Like, it's still a fairly tight machine. So, though I do think they replaced at least the y-axis motor, if not the ball screw as well. So maybe at some point before they sold it, they replaced a bunch of stuff. But I don't know. It's making parts for now.
It's never cut acrylic. You forgot to see the little star at the bottom of that statement that says, "Since we went through and replaced everything that was broken."
Yeah.
Right.
After we realized how bad it was.
Yeah, star in the last 30 days. Like, well, I'm excited for you to have a second spindle so you can take care of that. I'm sure that like having a problem like that when you only have one spindle is rough. Like, I remember our Kitamura having board issues on and off, and it was terrifying. Like, all right, I got a big order. Can I actually deliver? We'll see.
But you know what? That machine has paid for itself basically every 2 months since I've got it. Like, it was a cheap machine. It's running. Like, I'm doing fairly high value, low material removal parts. It's the advantage of going on the Xometry board and being able to pick the parts you want. If it has a lot of material removal, I just don't take it. And so it's working still. It's holding on there.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Speaking of which, AJ, you'll find this pretty interesting, but there's a guy that's local here, same guy that's getting an OM just like you, like what you have, and he does knives. His name's Tom Crine. I've mentioned him a couple times on the podcast, but he's got a mini mill with a Pearson pallet system, and he's working on a system where he can stick his knives on, or whatever he's milling, on his mini mill, and then when he's done, he'll move the whole pallet system over to the OM that he just bought, and he's going to do a bunch of detail work with the OM.
That is very much my plan with the Aero system.
Yeah, it was pretty cool as he was talking about it. And I thought that's what you had talked about doing with yours, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember.
So, Harrison, speaking of spindle issues,
Oh,
how's the Doosan? Still making parts?
Oh, you have spindle issues?
yeah.
Oh,
Sorry,
no.
I didn't mean to drag it out, but the audience, I'm sure, wants an update.
Yeah.
I want an update.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So have you heard the story, James?
No, I don't know what's going on. I vaguely remember seeing a thumbnail of like my Doosan is something. I remember seeing a thumbnail of something going wrong.
Well, if you caught the one that AJ accidentally posted, it would be quite graphic. But so the short story of what's going on with this little saga is we got our Doosan, and before the ink even dried on us signing off on the machine, we were running a job. I think it was the first major job through it, and I had a part that was I had bought a 3/4 inch Harvey 4 end mill that was with a 2.5 inch length of cut, I think, or 2.25 inch length of cut. Anyways, um, I bought that tool just for this one job, and I had it in ER collet holder, and it wasn't. It was slipping out, and so I had to slow it way down. Ken Metal rep came out and said, "Hey, let me get you a hydraulic holder so you can run it right." He gave me a hydraulic holder to try it out and to in the right speeds and feeds for it. And when I tried it, it threw apart. And after it threw apart, I've been having spindle noises since then. And I had the Doosan techs come out. They basically said, "We'll take care of you," but I couldn't figure out what that means for a couple weeks. And turns out, "We'll take care of you" means we're going to charge you full price for a new spindle. So,
Did they get you a quote finally?
so they got me a quote for a rebuilt spindle, which my understanding is a new spindle with installation comes in at around 20, and this rebuilt comes in around 15.
Hmm.
And the thing that like kind of irks me a little bit is about it is if they were going to take care of us, they're still charging me full price for labor. And
Right, and
like
that's the area that they can actually discount.
that's the area that they could actually do something.
Yeah.
And so I called to him. I called the salesman, and I just kind of explained the situation and like, listen, and I've had 3 or 4 people that have listened to the saga online that have reached out to me through Instagram and whatnot, and it sounds like the SVM spindles are pretty weak, or have a lot of problems. And so like because like a lot of people are having spindle replacements. Like one guy was telling me that he was running a an aluminum part with a 2.5 inch high feed mill or shell mill, and he typed in an offset wrong, and he dropped it like a 1/4 inch lower than it was supposed to, and it went into the part and it stalled the machine, and it just stalled the machine. It just aired out, whatever. And when he got the techs in there and they were looking at it, they're like, "Oh yeah, it shouldn't cause any problems," and it ended up putting flats on his machine. And
Jeez.
it took him like 4 months to get it figured out, and or 3 months to get it figured out, a couple months to get it figured out. I think it was 3 or 4 months. And at one point, they were like, "Oh, Doosaw didn't make the spindle; it was a Fanuc made spindle, so you got to talk to them." And so they had Fanuc techs that came out and looked at it, and they said, "No, it's a Doosan problem." And then I'm trying to remember all the details of the saga he told. And then there was another deal where like, what was it? Um, a random spindle showed up at their shop, and they didn't know anything about it, and it was the wrong spindle that didn't even fit on their machine. And techs came out to go install it, and they're like, "This isn't going to work." And so he eventually like tried to detail it all out in like a Word document about everything that happened, and said, "Listen, I haven't signed off or agreed to anything at this point. So like, if you guys try to charge me, like I haven't signed any paperwork." And they came in and they fixed it and they replaced it. And he's like, "To this day, I don't know if it was under warranty. I don't know if if I'm going to get a random bill in the mail. Like it's been a couple months since then, and I still haven't heard like, did they just fix it? Is it warranted? Like what? I don't
Oh,
know." So
that's so
I'm just like,
frustrating.
and I'm like, okay, so I'm in the beginning of this, and I hope it doesn't turn into this.
But the
And
spindle's still making good parts. Finishes look
it's
good and
still,
all that.
the finishes look amazing, but the
Okay.
spindle sounds horrible. And it was starting to quiet down, but now it's starting to get loud again, I think, which is not a good sign.
I mean, if they're not going to help you out, just run it till it dies. Make money
That's
with it.
kind of what we're doing right now, because we can't afford to switch it out right now. I mean, if we push came to shove, we would figure out a way to make it happen. But like, I'm not gonna just go spend that money just cause. At least not right now. Not this early in the saga. So,
Do
anyways, we'll
they
see.
take your core if you buy the rebuilt spindle?
Yeah, and they give you 20% back off the core, but
Mm,
that doesn't apply to the labor, I don't think.
that's
So
too bad.
yeah, and so I think like whenever they sent the quote, there was nothing in there that was like, we're gonna do this to try to help you, and so I'm a little bit frustrated with them right now, and we're looking at getting a dual spindle y-axis lathe, and I've told them that this is really souring my desire to get another Doosan in here. And so I actually have Akuma coming tomorrow, and we're getting a quote from a Mazak as well, because I have some parts coming up that we're bidding, and if they go through, it would be enough work to keep a machine busy for a dual spindle y-axis lathe. It'd be enough to keep it busy for 3 weeks out of the month for the rest of next year.
Oh, awesome. That's killer.
So
That's nice.
I want to be able to, if I do get that job, I'm not going to do it on my current machine. And the nice thing is it's a reoccurring job that I can continue to get year after year. And so I want to be ready to pull the trigger on that if that were to happen. So
Yeah, I don't
and
blame you not wanting to buy another machine from them if they're just going to treat you like this.
yeah, so and I've told the salesman that I'm like, listen, like we're looking at buying another machine if stuff happens, and you got an uphill battle at this point to sell me another machine.
If they know you're trying to buy another machine and still aren't being super helpful, then that's definitely sketchy.
Yeah. So, and what's interesting is with last week when we talked to Zap, he didn't seem to have a lot of positive things to say about Doosan versus Haas, which I thought was quite surprising because he goes around and sees a ton of shops, and so I thought he would have had a more positive outlook on the Doosans because that's what I've always heard.
Right.
So
I think that their quality is probably taking a hit as they got more popular. Like they seem to be turning out machines like crazy. And the last one I ran was a DNM, and I liked that one. Like compared to our Matsuras at my last job, it was a pretty good machine. But I mean, we also had somebody crash it hard enough in Z that they had to tweak the machine out of level to get the spindle back in line with the table. So that was
Yikes.
fun.
and they didn't have to replace the spindle.
They didn't have to replace the spindle. Yeah.
See, that's the stories I keep hearing, and it's just like there's no way that my spindle could have got damaged if that's the. And so I think the new ones are just.
That is quite a large end mill, though. Like, and the
It
problem is,
is.
like, what doesn't probably help is how good the holder was, because it probably transferred that energy really well into the spindle.
Yeah,
I
But,
need my
I mean,
tool
like
holders
an
to have
ER
a crumple
collar that would
zone.
have sucked up
it-
some of that.
so to put a little bit more context on when that end mill engaged, so you can kind of decide for yourself if that was a lot of force or not. The part was 2 inches, 2.25 inches tall, but I was only going down about 2 inches into it, and I was doing a high feed pass around the outside. I had already profiled around the outside at a slower feed rate and a different depth of cut. And so when it came around and it caught the part and it caught up to where it had already been pre-cut, it was only going at probably half the depth of what it had been programmed to go to, and it only made it about an inch into the part before it pulled it out.
What was it in? Just like a Kurt Weiss or something?
It was in basically a Haas branded Kurt Weiss with serrated jaws.
Oh wow, I'm surprised it pulled it out. Did it break the serrated jaws? Like, was it fragile
No,
steel or something?
jaws were fine.
Brittle.
Tool was fine.
Wow.
Like I found the where it hit the back of the machine, and the powder coat painting. There's a small line. So the way that those machines are built, you have the sheet metal, and then you have like the two 90-degree bends, and then the other sheet metal coming up to it. It hit on the seam where those two pieces of sheet metal hit. That was a little proud, and it just put a little crease, like it just barely removed a little bit of that paint. That's all it did.
Hmm.
And so like I feel like you would have like this massive hole in the side of the machine or something if it like hit it that hard.
It's just
Or
such
something.
a like unique thing though, every crash. Because like I
I know
launched
it
a
is.
part out of my vise in my Speedio with an FCR hard enough to get the full square indent in the side panel, and it didn't
That's
kill the spindle. It was
terrifying.
totally fine. This was 3 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like that D&M at work, not only did that guy crash that hard, but another employee was pin gauging a hole and forgot the pin in the hole and then tried to run a tap through the pin
I'm
in
always so
that same
scared of that.
machine. And like all of those were totally fine. But, you know, I've also heard of people like, oh, I broke a 10 millimeter end mill in my machine and my spindle's trashed. So like I
Yeah.
think it's just really a very unique situation every time.
For sure.
Well, what's funny is like a month before this happened, in my Haas, I was broaching and I put the wrong offset, and it was crashing into the jaws of my vise because I had walked away, and I just hear a bang, 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 and I come over and it's just ramming straight into the jaws, and it's been fine. It's had no issue.
Ugh. Yeah.
I was talking to Zach. I don't remember his Instagram handle. He's the dude that works on the watches. I think he's in like Cleveland, Ohio, somewhere in Ohio. And he crashed his like current Evo spindle and it actually made it better.
I think I heard that story a little bit. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So
crazy.
I and also like the more precise a spindle is, the weaker it is usually, or more like a glass cannon it is, I guess. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that could be a factor. I really don't know. Like, I'm just sorry that it happened, and it sucks that
Well,
they're not taking care of you.
the whole reason we picked up this machine over the Haas, like when we were looking down on paper and we're comparing the specs of the two machines and we're trying to decide which one to spend on like our thought process is, okay, this machine is going to be the tank. We're going to throw all the big jobs at it, the big tools at it. It's built better than the Haas is. Like that's how the image was in my head, and that was the deciding factor for us to go from a different brand over to that one. And so, yeah, it was just not what I was expecting.
Yeah, yeah, it's frustrating, especially when you needed it so bad to just be up and running. I'm feeling those pains a little bit with the U500 of like, I just need to make parts on it, and like I'm having to kind of screw around because I told you guys before this, like there's some issues with nothing that Yamazin or brother did, but some of like the kinematic stuff that I'm sorting through right now, and it's just it sucks when you buy a machine and you're like, I need to make parts yesterday on this machine, and you're still like, you know, I'm thankfully only a couple days into it, but it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
Was it a smoother experience with the C250?
It was, but especially because it was already an installed machine. Like we bought that very lightly used from a friend in town, and so we paid them to deinstall it and reinstall it and all of that, and like
Okay.
everything kinematics wise is built into the control on the Heidenhain, and so you're not really relying on anybody else, any other company to provide software that works.
That makes sense, yeah.
So, what specifically is going on?
The kinematic program from Bloom just doesn't work.
Oh, interesting.
Nice.
They're working on it right now. Apparently, you know, it's a known issue. I didn't realize when I bought the machine that this was a relatively new option that they had just kind of released for the U500 or for the D0 controls, and it'll get you close, but not close enough. Like it's within maybe 2.5 or 3 thou, not within, you know, if it was within 3 or 4 tenths or 5 tenths, I would be fine with it probably.
This is
But
for the center of rotation.
yeah. Yeah.
Could you
What
like
not
make like almost like a cube with the pockets in it and kind of just figure it out roughly yourself?
that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
It's a little bit tough because you have 6 points of control. So you have center of or you have rotation axis XYZ for the tilt axis and then XYZ for the rotation axis, and they interact with each other.
Yep.
So it's not just as easy. Like on a fourth, it's very easy of like, okay, this is off. You adjust half the value, you're
Yeah.
back to whatever it is. But as the tilt affects the turn and vice versa,
Yeah.
it's not quite as easy as just, doing the math like that.
We had to take one of the pseudocomas off this week because the Neo part ended up not being a Neo part, so we had to put it on the Robo Drill. And I had to put the pseudocoma on back last night, and like the AxiSet program wasn't working, so I had to do that. It's just like you just have to sit there and think about this. Like, okay, if I adjust this, and this one moves, but this one moves, and it's just annoying.
Yeah,
Very time
and really, it's
consuming.
like the last little bit that's the hardest. Like,
Yeah.
one of the values, it was I think the Z for the tilt axis was significantly off, and that was very easy to figure out in comp. And then now I'm kind of getting down to the last thou adjustment, and that's where I have to tweak this one this way and this one this way, and so I just
Yeah.
make a new block every time. I have a sheet that I put the block on. I number the block.
Yep.
I write down exactly what parameters I changed to what, and so that way I can kind of track it through and be like, okay, this is kind of what this parameter is doing, and I'm very close, but it's frustrating for sure.
Definitely.
So one thing that I was curious of real quick is what was the option? Was it like Renishaw before Bloom, or so?
I
Like
think you
what?
could buy the Renishaw Axis set, but I think there was just no option. I think they would just like manually dial it in because these values are very small. Like I think if you ran just 3+2 stuff at all zeros in these, you would be very close and could dial it in. It's for me, it matters most because I'll be doing simultaneous stuff and I need to blend across the travel.
Is the probe accurate enough that you could? So I guess the question that I have is I've gone through this on the Haas a lot, and that's where I got that program from the Haas tech that he wrote himself, or that he kind of went through, and that has allowed me to dial it in to as accurately as the probe can read down to the tenths and get it just bang on perfect, as close as the probe can read, which is more accurately than I can do with any calibration cubes that I've done thus far. Like any cubes that I've tried to do have not been as efficient as that program.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that a program is the right solution, and we might end up just changing to AxiSet and seeing if that works. I don't know. We'll kind of just play it by ear. Like I said, I've had the machine in operation for 3 days or 4 days or something like that. So it's right now I just don't have a ton of time to mess with it.
I might send you that code just so you can look at it, and if you decide to write your own program, maybe you can get some inspiration from it to convert it to what you need.
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to write anything. I paid for this option. It will be fixed.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
That's how it works.
Well, I mean, if you're manually dialing in calibration cubes, then I feel like this could be an easier option. Is all I was saying.
Oh yeah. Well,
I think you
then
missed
I'd
some
have to.
context on your bathroom break.
Yeah, I would have to
Yeah.
rewrite that because I think I have more values than you do in the comp. I have XYZ for both tilt and rotation, and if I remember right, you have 4 or 5 values. 4, yeah. So I've got 6, and so I would have to kind of backtrace that math and then still figure it out.
Well, the way it works in that program is it doesn't tell me which values to change. What it does is it's a program that you'll start the ball in a location, you'll find that location, it'll rotate it to another location, it'll spit out the values of what it thinks it should be versus what it actually is measuring. And then you can use those values to go change for me it's 4 values, and then you can rerun it and see how close or far it is away, and just kind of dial it in that way. Just like I'll move it through 4 rotations on when it's vertical, and then I'll do another 3 locations when it's tilted.
Cool.
And that's just because I can't get down low enough to get down to the other one without crashing.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to take a look at it for sure.
So I think now would be a good time to take a quick pause and thank our Patreons. So I'm actually going to read all of the Patreons, and not just all of the current ones, but anybody who has ever given us money on Patreon at any point, since this is the 100th episode. So we have this is in no particular order, Leland B, Doug H, Quack, Murray, DSI, Harris, Freaky Climber, Prescott from 1Z2Z Systems, YZFXTX, Trey Vestal, Guy L, Johnny Woods, Eric H, Ildorn, Alexander Block, Scott from Design the Everything, Jamie Peacock, Zach at Volunteer Metals Works, Chris Zaik, Jeb Campbell, Faro Technologies LLC, EJ at Nocturnal Welding, Simon V, Chris at Thought Bomb Design, and as ever, Jake Brownson. So thank you guys. We appreciate you. This is the last time I'm going to say this, but you guys are welcome to leave now that we're done with IMTS and you've paid for that trip. If you want to hang around, we will absolutely take the money and slowly upgrade our systems. But we're not, I think, doing this for money, and we appreciate your support.
At this point,
you don't
it's
have
therapy.
to if you don't want to. Yeah. All Patreon members get access to our Q&A, even if you join at the free level. And if you join at a paid level, you get early access to our episodes. Our patrons will enjoy a particularly early access to this video. But going to those Q&A questions, let's start with the simple one from Quack. How much of your work is 5-axis work? Which I guess is for everybody except me.
For us, I would say it's probably in the neighborhood. Well, it depends on the time of the season, it seems like. Because for a while, I would say for a month or two ago, we were up at like the 60 to 70% range. But here recently, it's been closer to like 30 to 40%. So it just kind of depends on what parts are coming in. But on average, I'd say it's probably under 50% or around 50%. But I mean, anything that I can put on the 5th axis that will benefit me, I will 100% put on the 5th axis. It's more like what can I fit on there than do I actually need it? Because it just makes things so much nicer.
Yeah, it's very much the hammer nail analogy. Like, I think I would say at this point is probably 70 to 90% of our work is 5-axis. Of that, do I think that I could maybe do another 20 or 30% of that on a 3-axis and multiple ops? Sure, but I like tabbing off parts and shipping them, and it's much more fun and it's much more efficient. So, yeah, I'd probably say like 70 to 90 right now.
Yeah, it's definitely like 80, 90 here. And like some of it, yeah, it's just like a hole on the side of the part, but like why am I going to do that in a different operation? Sometimes if it's like a really tight true position and the machine's going to grow too much over the day, then yeah, I'll make that a different op, but that's super uncommon. It's pretty much everything is on the 5.
Yeah.
Are you still doing a lot of Xometry work?
It's a good amount, but doing a lot of aerospace now. Somehow we've managed to find clients and clients find us, and it's kind of just been like working out, I guess. So yeah, been doing a lot of non-Xometry now.
So 5-axis medic asks, is Xometry on an up or a downswing?
Well, in terms of workload or like the company itself? Because I guess like then you could just check the public stock.
I think it means
probably workload.
I don't know, in general.
I mean, for us, it's been only getting better, the work we see. And we've just been able to be more selective and take higher paying work. So a lot of it now is just like robot work. So I'll take a job and like the robot's running right now. It'll run for another 25 hours. And it's like minimal input, but still high paying work since it's quick turnaround. So for us, it's only been getting better. And I think it will continue to get better as they pick up higher end clients and more government work. So
I'm going to need to pick your brain on that setup.
Say it again?
Yeah.
I'm going to need to pick your brain on that setup at some point because that's basically my goal.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I want to come back to that as well. But on your Xometry side, are you getting a lot of high volume stuff? Is that how you're able to get the 25-hour runtime?
Usually like a couple hundred parts. So, and they're usually pretty small. So we'll be able to do it out of round bar or like small rectangular bar. And then just quick dovetail it, set it up on the table. And then right now, the biggest like thing holding us back is the UR robot because I still haven't gotten my programs like completely dialed in. So it's kind of just not fully reliable yet. And I'm also still kind of just trying to figure out how to use that stuff because I've obviously never used it before. So yeah, it's just like set up the robot program, dial it in on the machine, and then just fill the grid, and then insert a line of code at the top and the bottom of the program that lets the robot do its thing, and then it just goes. And we've been pretty lucky so far because I think, yeah, every single job so far we've run has been plastic, so tool wear is not an issue. We have a dedicated plastic library, so the tools are super sharp. So it's not like, I use this in aluminum now, it's kind of dull and plastic. So like chips wrapping up around tools is never an issue anymore. We get really sharp drills, so that's not an issue. So yeah, but process reliability still isn't perfect, but it's been good because like the quick turn, higher volume work has paid really well. So the robot was paid off very quickly in like 2 jobs. It was completely made back. So yeah, it's been good. Definitely going to do it on the other robo drill after we get another machine. So
the second part of his question was also, what does the ITAR/CMMC landscape look like on Xometry? And what is CMMC? Because I don't actually know that
CMMC is like the next kind of version of ITAR. So it's like level 2. So level 1, 2, and 3. 3 is for like primes, I think. Like a shop will really never have to deal with that. Level 2 is where shops will have to be. So that's dealing with controlled unclassified info, which is like a drawing of a F-15 part, or it's all defense work. And then level 1 is dealing with, I think, just like contract papers themselves. I think it's FCI, but I forget what that stands for. So level 2 CMMC is like you get audited, and then so you pay an auditor, and they approve is not the word. It's kind of like the same process as ITAR. I forget the term though. And like you get audited and approved for CMMC level 2, but it's following the guidelines of NIST 800-171, which is just how to deal with controlled unclassified info. So from what I know, Congress has to pass the bill to make CMMC like the next big thing. But once that passes, if you do any defense work, you'll have to have CMMC level 2, or like we aren't going to have CMMC level 2, but we're right now working with a consultant to become compliant with NIST 800-171. So then we can work through shops who have CMMC level 2 to do that CUI work. And it's kind of sketchy, I think, on Xometry, because controlled unclassified info is supposed to be like pretty tightly controlled, but Xometry just says like, check this box if you're NIST 800-171 compliant, which I think is probably fine for now since Congress hasn't passed the bill, but I don't know how they're going to handle that once it passes. But pretty much you get ITAR and you send them the paper that like the ITAR approval paper, and then they just start showing you ITAR work. Like it's probably way simpler than it should be. But things will probably change once CMMC fully rolls out, if it ever does, since the government's crazy slow. But it's looking like it finally will.
It stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, just for everyone's info. And it is crazy expensive to get certified, and is going to be a giant shot in the foot for the government. I think it's so stupid that they're like, let's make it harder for small businesses to work with us, and we're going to provide no support. And now you have to pay. Like the last quote I heard from a friend in town was between 40 and 60 grand to get spun up for CMMC level 2.
Yeah, level 2 for us would be around like 100 grand is what we were told. Just for NIST compliance, I'm paying 9 grand right now. But we kind of have some ins with some shops that that actually have CMMC already, so it kind of made sense for us. But I was talking to one of these guys, and he's doing work for like for like a defense prime, and they were like, if this bill goes through, we're going to lose like 80% of our suppliers, which is kind of like insane. So yeah, they're going to have to figure something out there. Seems like a pretty bad bill to pass, but I mean, if you're set up for it, sweet.
Well, if they were smart, they would pass this bill, and part of the bill would be to create like a fast track for shops that wanted to do this, and they would provide you an auditor, and they would provide you discounts on things like NX or ITAR certified cam systems, and they would help you get it so that they could stop saying, like, it just reminds me of that meme of the guy putting a stick in his own spokes and then blaming somebody
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
Like that's going to be the
Mhm.
government in a year or whatever is like, oh, can't find any good suppliers. And it's like, no, it's your fault. You did this.
It is actually kind of
Yeah.
funny because the shop I used to work with is so old school, and like they're going through the NIST compliance route right now because they do all like submarine work, and them being so old school is actually helping because like there's so little on the computer. So in a roundabout sense, some of the older shops will actually not have as hard of a time, but if they're keeping anything on the computer, they're just going to be bamboozled by it because because they're still printing out Excel sheets and stuff. But yeah, it should be interesting.
It's insane.
Okay, so let's say you are running a shop that, for example, looks a lot like mine. I'm not ITAR or anything yet. What would you recommend a shop like mine does? What should I do? That's my question. What should I do? Like, should I get ITAR certified at this point? Should I
Are you
worry
staying
about?
busy?
Yes.
Don't do it then.
I think the less certifications you need to get, the better. It also really, I think, depends on like your path in the future too. Because like for us, we're looking to get more into the aerospace, and we're looking to kind of build the business to be a valuable thing to potentially sell in the future if we ever wanted to. So things like ISO or AS or NIST compliance makes sense. But I think if you're just like doing what you're doing and making money, like don't do anything that's going to add overhead. Like, oh, now I need a new cam software. Arguably, maybe you don't. But like if it's working, cool. That's my opinion, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, to run Fusion and maintain ITAR compliance is a giant headache. And all of the fun, fancy features you enjoy in Fusion, a lot of them you won't have access to because you can't
Yeah, I don't
import
template.
things.
I don't template anything right now because like dealing with it, it's I can't do any of that stuff. So it's like for the 10% of work that isn't ITAR, it's not worth that upfront investment for all like putting the time into Fusion. So my CAD side of things, my CAM, I guess, side of things is woefully lacking because it's all ITAR work.
But it pays much better. So at least there's that side of it. Even if you
Yeah,
can't use as much of the stuff. So it's kind of a catch-22
Do you
yeah.
in
think
that
there's any
sense.
like marketing benefit to being ITAR certified? Like, as you're going around knocking on doors, like, you can put that on your list of qualifications or whatever. Like, do you think that means anything to customers?
I think it
Does it make
definitely
you?
does. And that's based on like conversations you had with people, and they're like, "Oh, you're ITAR certified," but it's like maybe that's just the specific people we're trying to target.
Yeah, it depends on the customers. Like
Yeah,
you go to, someone making Ford stuff and they're going to be like, I don't care. Like,
they probably don't even know what it
okay,
is. Yeah,
this is not CUI. Like, why would I care? But
yeah.
you go to any aerospace shop and they're going to want that. So it just depends on where you want to steer your business.
Are you
It,
ITAR, Dylan?
Oh, no.
You don't do any defense or anything like that.
Are
I
you
think
like
me and you are the
ISO
only
or
ones that are
anything?
ITAR.
Say that again.
Harrison first. Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think me and James are the only, like, I think we're both ITAR, but you guys aren't. AJ and Dylan
Um,
aren't.
yeah, Dylan, are you like ISO or anything?
I have
Okay.
a background in AS and ISO. I worked in a quality department for years. I want to put that off as long as possible. Like, I think we run our shop very AS light, I would say, in terms of, how to measure things and all of that. But I've been in the paperwork department, which is what we called quality. Like, you need an entire person to do that as their job if you want to do it right.
Yeah, we've been thinking about hiring an inspection person and like a quality person side of things, and we'd probably only start tackling that stuff more deeply if we hired that person, because it does open up doors to like higher volume stuff. But I
Totally.
don't
But
know.
like
Yeah.
making fairs, bubbling prints, all of that stuff, like it can be a full-time job depending
Oh
on
yeah, and
what
like
your customers flow down.
I want to do that, but I don't want to be the one doing it. Like I would like that to be a thing we offer, but not something I personally have to do. I'll just pay someone to do that if the
Yeah.
numbers all work out.
And there's super cool applications out there that do a lot of that for you. Like we used Inspection Expert for a while for his when we were bubbling prints. There's high QA that does
Yeah,
a
like
lot of
QA
auto.
CAD and stuff.
Yeah. That'll auto balloon. High QA was cool because it had like a full in process measurement module as well, where like the people on the floor could input stuff and you could collect all the data you wanted. But yeah, it's just a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're doing a lot of like aerospace stuff right now where it'll be like quantity 100, and it's like any features under 5,000 need 100% inspection. So we have like these insanely long inspection reports, and like every single one needs to be tagged. So our little label maker has like 20-foot like strings of labels coming out of it, and it's kind of absurd. But yeah, I don't know. I think like at least for us, I think it's really cool being a part of like some of these aerospace companies and defense companies. So I think it kind of works with like the shop ideology, I guess, like being a part of that kind of stuff. But you can also be a part of that and not have to be ITAR. So
Yeah, I would say, AJ, for you, like I would be aware of the stuff you need to do so that it's not, if you end up wanting to go that way, it's not, having to learn all this stuff. Like I would still definitely here and there do some research into it, but I would not put that as a priority number one at least from what you've shown online.
Okay. It's just something I've been thinking about. I was talking to my dad the other day. My dad used to be an executive at AT&T, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I implemented ISO in 4 or 5 different places inside AT&T." I was like, "Well,
Hmm.
if you know this stuff, maybe we'll, you know, have you come help me out for a bit, try to get it up and running." So I've just kind of been
I definitely
wondering
don't
about
think
that.
ISO would make sense for your size.
The question is, like, as I get better machining capabilities, better inspection capabilities, does it make sense for me to go more towards medical stuff?
That's a
And
completely different ISO cert. Just
That's
FYI. That's
13485. Yeah.
it's not 9001. So
It can be. A lot of companies do 9001, but I think implant work needs to be 13485.
I don't know. I don't know anything about this stuff yet, so that's where I'm at.
yeah, but that's what I mean about like knowing what customers you want, because like James said, like you can sometimes get by with 9001, but there is a specific medical ISO as well. So like if
Yeah.
you're, hard set on doing medical, that's what you should be researching. You should be finding consultants that do that kind of ISO, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I should have been a little bit more specific. I meant more like biomed kind of things. That's like a lot of my parts go to biomed companies. So not stuff that is going into people, but stuff that's going into like assembly lines. We have a big presence of that here in Indianapolis with like Lilly. They have a huge plant, and I know some people who work there, and their qualification to even think about getting on a vendor list is at least 9001. So
Yeah, they usually do that. Just the easiest way to vet you. It's like, you have it? Yes. Okay, cool. No. Okay, get out of here. That's a simple way to vet out most people.
I've always found that so funny too, that people look at AS and ISO like that, like, oh, you're a good company because
Yeah.
you have that. When really it just means I know how to document how much scrap I make. Like that's literally all
Yeah.
it means.
It's like the
Like,
classic meme where it's like the dirt road and then the little paved patch and then the dirt road again. Like that was totally my last job. They had AS and ISO, and it's just like such a mess there. And then you clean everything up, you get all your paperwork in order for the auditor, and then they'd be like, nobody talk to the auditor, nobody make eye contact with this person, like avoid them at all costs. And then like they come and go, and it's just back to normal. Like it does not mean you are a good shop at all.
yeah, not at all. Like it just shows like, hey, we are very good about documenting how many times we screw up. And like you can see how many times in documents. But yeah, you could make, a 10% yield on all your orders. And as long as you documented it well, you're ISO. And like as long as you had a plan of continuous improvement, you can be AS. Like it's silly. It really is. I think it's silly to approach those things with that in mind. Like if I see a shop that does that, there are many other questions I ask first before I think that they do quality work.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of customers will like be like, oh, you don't have AS? Like, oh, do you do this or do this? And they're like, okay, cool, that's good. Like they say they need it until they actually get a part from you or talk to you more, and then they're like, nah, we're actually good.
Yeah.
Or sometimes like you don't need it if you're going through a larger shop or something like that. Like they'll inspect the parts or do whatever on their end. So we do that a lot too. But you can definitely get really far without it. But there's
Yeah.
certain stuff where you just need it, like
And I'd
a
say that like
medical
a lot of
contract or something.
people ask for a QMS, and I think Xometry's QMS in a box is a really good head start on that.
For sure.
Like it does include everything that most quality departments are going to look for. And so like if you get that dialed and feel comfortable with that, then you can kind of think going forward where you want to go.
Yeah. I know a shop with like a bunch of guys and they're doing some really crazy work. Like some really, really crazy work, and they don't have it because they're like, yeah, we just have a good QMS and the customers approved it. And like space parts, medical parts, all sorts of stuff. And it's like no AS, no ISO, and they have no plans of getting it.
Yeah, I've definitely talked to a couple shops in the area who've had those types of requirements waived because they meet the goal of what those requirements are for without actually having them.
ISO compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how many things get waived when somebody's in a bind. I've worked at many shops where you're supposed to be all of these things to do work, and then they're like, "Oh, you can get it done tomorrow? All right, we don't care. Just get it done. Sure. We'll figure it out on the back end."
Mm-hmm.
All
Now,
right, next
James,
question.
sorry. I just
I
have
was going
one
to
more
move on.
question.
So if you have something else.
Oh, I was just going to ask him about the CMM and how if that's helped him get other customers as well.
I mean, we aren't really even using it much just because we haven't even like gotten the training on it yet. It was like half, and this is like arguably a bad idea. This isn't like a good idea, I guess. It was like half a sales like purchase and then half like for actual use. Right now we're just doing some basic stuff on it, but it's definitely helped us get more customers and literally just putting like, oh yeah, we CMMC inspection capabilities. Like people just like to see that, which is kind of goofy. It doesn't mean you need to get one, but it definitely helped us. And we do have intentions of using it more. I'd just rather hire someone and send them to get the training than me use the training. So I haven't gotten it yet. But if I ever need it, I'll get it, the training. So yeah, arguably a pretty overpriced sales tactic, but we'll have it for hopefully a long time. So it'll get used.
Yeah. We're looking at one just because I have a customer that does thousands of parts and they need inspections on every so many parts. And so I want to get it to not have to do that manually.
If it's not a crazy amount of features, I would ask them if you can try to get out of that. Just because, like, if they think they're going to get better inspected parts just because it's on a CMM, it's like a decent chance that's not true. Obviously, I don't know what the part looks like or the features or the tolerances.
It's firearms parts, and they have probably 4 or 5 CMMs of different varieties in their shop that they're inspecting customers' parts with, or parts that they're getting in, but they want to have people do their own inspection as much as possible.
Makes sense.
How many features? How many features do you have to do that inspection on?
They want. I need to go look through all the documents because we've gotten it waived so far, but they're starting to do production release and have us do that, and so the requirements are going to be a little bit higher for that type of stuff, and they want a certain amount of parts to be fully inspected and have like every feature inspected, and then they need a certain amount of parts with like some features inspected. And I don't know what that breakdown is yet because I haven't sat down and gone through the paperwork yet.
Are these lathe parts?
No, mill.
Oh, okay.
So like, for example, one of the parts that we're looking at doing is a magwell and doing a couple thousand of them a year. And the prints that we have, they probably have 40 to 50 measurements on 2 or 3 pages that they want us to inspect out. And they want, I think what they're calling for is 5 fully inspected parts before they release it for production with all the measurements on them. And
I would
then
not expect
after
a magwell to have that many inspection callouts. Like in my head, a magwell is like
I know,
simple.
but
funny.
Like talking to the engineer, he's like, yeah, only like 4 of those measurements are really critical, and it's like, okay, well, I can do those 4, but and then the real problem is a couple of those measurements, it's really really hard to measure it without either a granite table and some height gauges to be able to like I can't get calipers or micrometers or gauge pins into a couple of those measurements because the features are like on opposite ends of the part and aren't flat, and so I don't have a good way to measure them without a CMM that I can think of manually.
Well, that's what I was asking. Is like if you only have 4, you could build
Yeah.
hard gauges with drop indicators and things like that that would be quicker and more reliable than a CMM. But if you have
Yeah.
50 on a lot of parts, then that is where a CMM shines.
It's a lot
Yeah,
of indicators.
and I'm trying to get more parts from them, and so if I can have a CMM, especially because they just bought the one that we're looking at, so we're looking at a hexagon, and they just bought one to add to their fleet, and we can have program compatibility between the two.
That's
So
nice.
that's kind of what's driving me towards that way. And they've been asking me about some higher end work that quite frankly I would not feel comfortable measuring outside of a CMM just because I don't trust myself that much with inspection by hand compared to what I feel like a CMM, which would automate it, would make it just a lot more consistent and take out the human error.
I feel like you'd have more experience with this, Dylan, since I haven't used it too much, but I think that seems to be a decently large misconception with CMMs that it's going to make like inspection like better and more consistent. Like it definitely is
It
very
can.
easy to get super wrong numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that if you buy a CMM, you should take some GD&T courses then too, because I can make a CMM say whatever I want. Like I
100%.
know how
Yeah.
features are constructed, and I know how to lie to it to make it like, guess what? 3 points makes every plane flat within 0
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
because that's
Mm-hmm.
what a plane is. Like, so there are ways to skew data that if you don't understand how, not only how the callouts in GD&T, what they mean, but also how the CMM itself interprets that data, you can really screw up inspection too. So I would just take that with a grain of salt, or take that in advisement. Like if you're going to get a CMM, get the training as well in GD&T and know what you're doing going into it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like we when we went to look at it, the hexagon one, we went to a demo. Like I was trying to push them to show me examples of trying to find as many errors and doing as much like any type of plane measurements or circular measurements. I didn't want to do any touching. I wanted to drag it and like actually see, I want to see the warp in the bore or if there's a taper in these directions and like see as much of that type of information as I can. Which I did find out that the bore that we interpolated on the part that we brought them, it had 3 lobes, 3 transition lobes from our machine,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked them, what level is that, and it was something like 50 millionths or something. I forget what it was, but it was like,
Right.
but like you could see it as like a lobe profile.
That's something
And
I'll warn you against too. If you get a hexagon, I don't have experience with Zeiss one, so I can't tell you, but scanning looks awesome. You only want to do it when you actually need it, because all you're doing is introducing like a million points that the software has to filter. So you're still only getting a certain number of points. And
mm-hmm.
B, you can really log down that computer with the too heavy of a scan. Like if you scan a cylinder all the way up and take literally 100,000 points, it'll just sit there and chug for a second before it does its next move point, because it is trying to calculate, and it will. I mean, they spec them out with pretty intense workstations, and even then, I had to be very sparing in how I used scanning. Only if I had, circularity or cylindricity or something that needed scanning. Otherwise, it would really bog stuff down.
I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
still pretty impressive how many points it can handle. Like, yeah, it'll slow down, but like 100,000 points and it's able to like figure that out pretty fast. Still, I feel like that's pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, well, it comes down to the filtering too, because like of that 100,000, I don't know how many it used, but it probably used 20,000 or something, and then threw out all the outliers, and you can change the filters on that, and you can decide where those ranges are. And like I said, you can make a CMM kind of say whatever you want, so you really have to know what you're doing with it.
Yeah, but provided you have the training, I think it would be a faster, more efficient method than doing it by hand.
Yeah, once the program is written, for sure. The writing of the program takes some time, but if it's a production part, it would be great for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're driving it towards. That, and to offer it as a service to, so one of my customers, they get a lot of parts from a lot of shops that aren't CMM, that don't have any kind of inspection, anything. And so they have some parts that are really tight tolerance that I asked them, if I got a CMM, would you be interested in us measuring stuff for you and certifying things? And I think they would be.
Nice.
So
that'd be great.
So, question for Dylan. Let's say you had, I don't know, a fairly simple production part, 20, 30 dimensions or something that you'd be measuring. How many parts would you need before you programmed a CMM to do it instead of just doing them by hand?
Kind of tough without seeing the features themselves. Like, I would say GD&T heavy parts lend themselves more to a CMM, especially if you have, position tolerance in 3 axes or things like that. But, if I've got 20 thicknesses, I can snap those out with a mic pretty quick. And again, it really depends on quantity of parts, how often you're running them, what the print looks like. I would say that the 3D stuff is where CMMs really shine over a person. It's really, really hard to calculate three datum true position by hand. It's doable, but it sucks. So yeah, that's what I would lean towards.
All right, next question from Alex. Do you have any suggestions to stay motivated in manufacturing? I find myself needing to jump from project to project to feel like I'm not in a rut.
Lean improvements. Like that's something that, like, me and Weston had this conversation today at lunch. If we're not improving the shop by some small amount every week, I feel like we're going backwards. And I feel like that's when you get into a rut, is whenever, like, if you have a toolbox and it's messy, and once a week you spend a little bit of time going in and cleaning up one drawer and organizing it and getting it into place, that way whenever you come back to use it, everything's where you want it to be and you can just grab it and you're just a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient. To me, that just keeps us going. Like, and whenever we get so busy that we don't have time to do improvements, like, I feel like that's when it starts to really grate on us, because we're just go, 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 go. And then the shop gets worse and worse and worse. And you don't feel like you're actually, you're just chasing your tail. At least that's how it's been for us.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I'd say pretty similar for us too, just making improvements, but also for us, I think like aligning ourselves with customers that we think are kind of like fit our goal. So like our goal is like helping accelerate innovation. So we're aligning ourselves with customers that are like actually doing that. And that's pretty cool. And you're working like till 2 a.m. on something, but this part's actually going to like make a difference. That's a big thing for me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my cop-out answer is that's why we do prototypes, so that I can switch jobs every other day. But no, I think continual improvement, I agree, is like the easiest. It's the easy button for staying engaged, because there is always something to improve. I have yet to be to a shop that is not still trying to fix something, or you walk in and they're like, oh, well, this will get better eventually. And, even if it looks perfect, you walk into the coolest shop and they're still working on stuff. So, there's always going to be something to do.
I would say it also, like, it's much easier to stay engaged when the parts that are coming off your machine are directly paying your paycheck, instead of like, those monies make your boss money, or those parts make your boss money, and then your boss gives you a steady paycheck. When you're making stuff on your own, it's like, you know what, I can knock out 100 of the same part. Like, this is easy money. It's like, that's a fun job at that point. So I don't know. If you're self-employed, I think that helps a lot, I guess is the answer. Though I have to say, with like, for example, back when I was doing carabiners with design the everything, and it was like, okay, machine the carabiner, sandblast the carabiners, powder coat the carabiners, machine carabiners, sandblast them, powder coat, machine, sandblast, powder coat. And like that went on for, like a month at some point. Like the type of work you're doing matters. And like Dylan was saying, doing prototyping work is a lot more fun. I haven't felt particularly grindy ever since switching to more job shop type stuff.
Well, and I don't know if you felt this way, but anytime I'm thinking about your Kickstarters, anytime I've ever taken prepayment on anything, it immediately makes me not want to do that thing. It is so counterproductive for me. It's like, well, I'm already paid. This is just work for nothing is what it feels. Even though I've been paid, it just feels like work for nothing. And so like we very much try not to do that. Like we'll take down payments on orders from new customers, but I just find it like such a motivation sap if I'm already paid for the work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I used to be very highly pro Kickstarter. At this point, I'm entirely against them. I don't recommend them at all. And that's one of the reasons is like, let's say you do a $200,000 Kickstarter, that takes you a year to fulfill. Like that is a very grindy year. And that will definitely weigh on you for that entire year. And, oh no, it might become a year and a half. And do you have enough money to cover the year and a half? And is your product viable outside of Kickstarter? You don't know yet. So I am not pro Kickstarter anymore at this point. I think
it seems like it takes a ton of advertising budget to really do a high level Kickstarter now. And for a lot of companies, I think, take that 10 or 20 grand and just put it towards making a good product and advertising it on your own and get it out kind of thing.
Yep. I think Design the Everything might have survived if we just slowly built up sales on, Etsy and our own website, driving information or driving sales via Instagram. I think the Kickstarters are what did us in.
Yeah. And maybe focusing on drops instead of the Kickstarters, because drops is kind of like the anti-Kickstarter. It's like you have everything ready to go and you only have a limited quantity, and however fast they sell, they sell.
Drops
It's
seem
like,
super sketchy for cash flow. Like I obviously have no experience with them, but it just seems sketchy from that standpoint.
everyone I've talked to who works in the knife space that does them say that they're great way to keep the community engaged and to drive up sales and kind of their brand image.
It's that scarcity mindset. People want what they can't have.
That makes sense.
You don't do a drop unless you know that you're going to sell out 100% and have 20% more people interested.
Yeah.
That makes sense then, yeah.
So, and then I guess the last thing I would say on that whole motivation thing is back when I was working for someone else in the engineer and as an engineer, as long as I was being challenged in that job, it's kind of taking that shop improvement and applying it to yourself. If I felt like I was improving as a person and becoming more capable and challenging what I could do in a design position, getting faster, learning the software better, you know, it's that whole improvement stuff, but applied internally instead of externally. That's, I think, is what, if you're working for someone else, that's the best place to get your motivation in those environments is improvement within whatever is within your control. It could be your, if you're running a machine, it could be your one toolbox. It could be challenging yourself to, if you're programming your own parts, challenging yourself to try different techniques and different processes to see what can be improved, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I very often try to start my day with some little improvement because it always puts me in a better headspace. Machines are warming up, like, oh, let's take 5 minutes to tidy this up, or let's take 5 minutes to relocate this trash can because it's better over here, or something like that.
The other thing I'll say that helps me is like I have a YouTube channel, I have a podcast, and it's still manufacturing focused, but it's also much more social. We get to kind of share the information that we're learning. that has very much helped. It makes me feel like I'm not just slaving away in my, in the corner of my shop all day, every day. Like we're kind of part of a bigger community.
And then of course, there's the answer nobody likes, which is motivation doesn't last. You just have to be disciplined about it, which always sucks. But I think that gets you further.
You got to learn how to enjoy the grind.
Yeah, that's true.
There are times where I'm buried. Like some of the happiest times I've been is when I'm buried under working till 4 a.m. and I just have a big smile on my face just because like I know it sucks right now, but it's a good suck in a way. And so I don't know if you could have that while being employed by someone else, but for yourself in those times where you're just balls to the walls and you just can't get out of you can't get out of your own way, or there's no time to get everything done. Like, I don't know. Sometimes in those moments, I just smile and I can't help it. It's just like I feel like I'm getting propelled forward, even though I feel like I'm behind. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, it's that flow state where it's just like everything comes together, and you just are running machines. You're it's a very set bit of movement, and you just keep following it and getting it done. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right, last question. What is an unpopular machining opinion that you hold?
Haas is better than Doosan. No.
I don't like vices. That's a pretty well-known one.
No.
I don't use face mills. I've said that before. That's something that for us it just doesn't make sense.
That's interesting. I don't know. I guess I'll have to think on that. I feel like probably most of what we're doing is unconventional, or by unconventional, I mean probably just doing it wrong. So maybe that. But not sure.
Well, this kind of comes back into a question that I kind of wanted to ask James, which was, what are your opinions on part loading versus pallet loading with robots?
I think it really just depends on the type of work you're seeing. I don't think it's one of those things that should be purchased before you see the work, or at least like the type of work, because I think we got lucky when we got the material loading system because we got it for customer specific parts, and like we didn't even talk to them about it. We just got it, and then that type of part went off to injection molding, and they're doing that forever. So we're like, oh crap, that was a potentially bad idea. And then like all of a sudden we started seeing a bunch of perfect work for it. But I think if you're doing higher volume or lower cycle times, I think material loading makes sense. So anything under 1 inch round bar, we can do 168 parts overnight. So even a crazy low cycle time, easily get a full night run. And just for us, like that number we want to hit is 16 hours. Like if I have to make 1,000 parts, the goal is at least 16 hours of unattended, just so I can always have the machine going without it cooling down at all and me having to warm it up. I think if you're doing longer cycle time, slightly lower volume, or maybe like a larger part, maybe like 4 inches by 5 inches, something like that, then I think vice loading makes sense. But I think the real answer is both. I think there is a place for both for sure. Just because like a lot of the small stuff we're seeing, it's like this would be stupid to load up on small vices, and this would also be stupid to try to put on a pyramid fixture, because that still wouldn't get us a ton. Like if we had 30 vices, let's say that gets us 90 pyramid fixtures. I just had to make all these fixtures, or I could just material load and get 200 pieces unattended. So I think it really just depends on the type of parts. Smaller, I think, lends better to material loading. Bigger, I think, lends better to pallet pool. But I think having both is easily the best answer. I don't know. That's my limited experience. I don't even have a pallet pool, so I couldn't even tell you. But I think I'll definitely be getting a pallet pool next, just because in some parts it's like I would never try to material load this with our current setup. The pneumatic vices take up a lot of room too, so if you have a smaller machine, that's kind of an issue. But don't even think about pallet loading on on these pseudocoma tables on the RoboJo. That's not even in the realm of possibility unless you're doing like crazy small parts, because you just lose so much room on what you're able to do. So I think whatever we get next will be larger, and then at some point pallet pool or material load, or try to hack it to do both. I don't know.
Okay, it's good to know. We're looking at doing both eventually. It's kind of I've I I can't find one over the other that I would want, that like I would make me want to just stick with one. So
What
we'll
size
probably
of
end
the
up with
parts?
some of it is, we've got like one customer that they have a lot of run of 50 parts and it's a lot of different sizes. And so I feel like part loading for those makes sense because it's a lot of stuff that could be 3-axis, 2 vices
Is
type
it like
work
a
where
2 inch long part or like a 12-inch long part?
they're smaller. I mean, they'll be, you mean the biggest one's probably in the 4x4 inch range.
Yeah, you
So
could probably material load that. I think something we tried to avoid for a long time was dovetailing, just trying to load raw material with the material loading. The biggest chunk we could comfortably fit, the KPS3 or whatever they're called from Shunk, the biggest one we could fit just doesn't have enough power to like get a good bite on material, so we've had to resort to dovetailing. So like if you're really opposed to that like prep op, then I guess even with pallet loading though, you kind of still have that prep op of having to put it in a pallet. But if we could avoid the dovetailing with a slightly stronger pneumatic vise, then that would definitely be nice. But you do have that extra op to consider usually.
yeah, and I wouldn't. I want to do. I think I want to do pallet loading on my Haas and part loading on the Doosan. If I'm gonna do automation, just because I'd like to do pallet loading on the 5-axis. I feel like I can build. Well, you could do part loading with the 5-axis. I think the pallet loading with the production type workflow and being able to have high fixture work holding on that, and being able to access all the different sides of the parts makes sense and get it kind of one and done overnight, versus the Doosan, because I have that wide table area. I can set it up to do either large parts, or I can check out all those vices and put in a whole bunch of pneumatic stuff and do
Mm.
part loading.
I think maybe the what's it called? The lights out manufacturing thing might make sense then, just because it's got that
Mm-hmm.
long range of capability that you're doing. So maybe something
Yeah,
like that would make sense.
yeah. In an ideal world, I'd be able to do part and pallet loading, but I'm probably gonna have to stick with one to start. And I think pallet loading will be the easier of the two in the beginning, if I can get the production work going on it.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah.
and then go to part loading. If I can do some part loading on the one machine, I probably will on the Haas. But it might make sense just to move that over to the Doosan. Just kind of depends. We'll play it by ear. We're not going to have a one size fits all. It's kind of like I want to get into automation as soon as possible, so I can figure out what I like and don't like, and like start playing around with it. It's kind of like the reason I wanted to get the Haas 5-axis is because I wanted to get my hands on 5-axis as soon as possible, so I can start using it and playing with it and learning what I like and don't like.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we sort of did the same. Like, our robotic cell wasn't that expensive. It was like, this might not be the best solution, but let's just try it. And we've definitely learned a ton about what we want to do next. So there's definitely some logic to that uh, thought, line of thought,
So
especially when it pays itself off already. So guess it wasn't that bad of an idea.
semi related question for Dylan. Since you're doing, fast turn prototyping type stuff, do you run an inventory of stock? Like if you do you keep certain sizes of different stocks on hand? Do you order everything in?
Right now, we order a lot in. McMaster is next day for us, so that's pretty awesome. With the saw, that's something that we're looking at is stocking square aluminum. I think like one by one, 2x2, 3x3, and 4x4, and then possibly some 316 in various sizes. That I'm gonna have to be a little bit more judicious with in terms of figuring out, what our typical parts need. But yeah, we're definitely going to start stocking, I think, 6-foot bars of a lot of that stuff, and that way we can react a little bit quicker.
Well, your material cost will go down a lot. As someone who was like heavily on the McMaster side until we started keeping inventory of material, the price reduction is insane on a per piece basis. Like there's
Yeah. Well, I mean, it'll mean that we can actually order from a real supplier that has quantity discount and things like
Yeah.
that, and so we're not paying the McMaster premium.
But I mean, even buying just like one 12-foot stick, you know, like there's a lot of times where I can buy a 3-foot stick and I can get a 12-foot stick for basically 5 to 10% more.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in the quick turn prototyping world, like the cost of the material 99% of the times is like the last thought on anyone's mind. It's just like, I need this part yesterday. And it's like the material ends up being so little. But obviously, cheaper material is better than expensive material.
For me,
You
it's just
say
saving that day of like having to wait for McMaster, and occasionally
For sure.
FedEx or UPS fumbles the package, and
Yeah.
I've had UPS show up with an empty box and a hole in the side, and that's another day that I got to wait now. And so
Yeah.
things like that, if I can, it's not going to prevent us from buying things from McMaster. I can guarantee it, because we do come across weird materials that we just won't have on hand. But at least for the orders in the materials that we do most often, I would love to be able to stock some of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I've started stocking 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch of aluminum, acrylic, and titanium. And granted, I had to get like a 1 foot by 1 foot sheet of those, and that lasts me a while.
I was gonna say, do they mail it in an envelope for you?
Sometimes. But I was wondering what the next step from that is.
Yeah, no, I think that's one thing that we're excited about, is to just be able to cut stuff on demand and not have to worry about it, because aluminum wasn't that bad on that chop saw, but man, stainless was just terrible. And we do a lot of 316, and so I'm just very excited for that.
And it's probably pretty loud.
It's horribly loud, especially as it goes dull. A fresh blade cuts great for the first 20 cuts or something, and then you feel it start getting dull, and it gets duller and duller. And like the one we have on there now, so our saw gets installed next Monday, and we are just limping through our last blade, and it like takes forever to get through 316 right now, and by the time it's done, you can't touch that part for a good 10 minutes while it cools down. It is so dull. It is terrible.
Man, I'm just glad I don't have my Harbor Freight saw anymore. That used to like start at a 30-degree angle and just slowly work more horizontally after that.
Yeah.
I think it was a nightmare.
Are you making a video?
3 of those things.
AJ, are you going to make a video on the Tormach saw? I am very curious to see how it is.
The day it came in, I kind of did I was just kind of excited, and my video didn't really make very much sense. And so I went back today and was like, all right, let's do some actual tests on this thing and get some like actual useful information. So how small of a part can it cut? How long of a part can it cut? How repeatable is the like clamping and reclamping as it does a progressive, move forwards? How big of a part will cleanly eject versus landing in the chip tray? So I recorded a bunch of that stuff today, which, by the way, the answer is about 3/4 of an inch.
And you said the drop was 10 inches?
I haven't actually measured it, but it's in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Now, you can cut shorter than that, but not with the auto feed.
Right. You have to do manual cuts. Yeah.
And there was one more question that I missed from earlier. Coolant. What are you guys' preferred coolants?
Still figuring it out.
250C.
I've only ever tried one, and I never remember what it is. It's either 250 or 251. I can never remember.
Yeah, I'm using 251. I've considered 291, but right now the cheapest way for me to buy coolant is in 1-gallon jugs from Tormach. The shipping from my distributor is like $150 on a 5-gallon pail, and so getting it that way just doesn't make sense. It's cheaper for me to get 5 gallons from Tormach in individual gallons, because at that point you get free shipping. So
I'm actually on the hunt for a new coolant. So I've tried 4 different ones at this point.
What's
I think.
wrong with them?
Well, 251, I didn't give it a fair shake because I didn't have a gauge and I only used it on the Tormach. And once I ran out of that barrel, I just started looking at other options. So I honestly should give that another shake. But
Yeah.
I've tried the Blazer Vasco 6000. And the problem with that one was it's kind of a vegetable based. And so it was kind of separating out and smelled like really bad at times. And just, it did good for like 3 months to 6 months. And then it just, you probably need to pump it and redo it type deal. And so didn't like that one as much
Almost
once we
all
got
of
to
their
that stage.
coolants are super pH dependent. Like we were at my last job, we used Blauser. I don't remember which one it was, but they had us tracking pH and concentration daily, and then adding more coolant until the pH hit what they wanted, because that's how they kill bacteria with the pH of the coolant itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what keeps the
Yes.
smell down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there was that. And then I feel like we tried another coolant, and I don't remember which one it was, but right now we have the Hengstifer's S1001, and it cuts really good, but it's becoming really, really sticky in the machine, and it's foaming really bad. And so those are the 2 issues we're fighting with it.
Is that the stuff that leaves like the brown residue everywhere too?
It's green.
Okay.
It's
There was
green
one
and
Hengstifer that I can't remember who I was talking to, but they said that the inside of their machine just got darker and darker as like this brown goo built up on everything.
this one's green and like everything becomes really sticky. Like this is the coolant that we've had several leaks in the shop there that I flooded the shop with, and
I feel your pain. It's okay. We've all been there.
But like when you walk around on the floor, you just it feels like you're walking on one of those sticky mats.
Ooh.
Where it's like you're walking all over the place. And so like in front of the Haas now, there's like a black spot on the floor where it's just sucked everything off your shoes. And so I just don't like that.
The only issue I've had with 251C is that I had some foaming issues too on the Tormach, but those went away when I switched to using RO water instead of tap water for topping up. Our water here is super, 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 super hard.
You've got well water, right?
We got well water, yeah.
Yeah.
And up until fairly recently, it wasn't even being filtered out of the well. So now we have like a 2-stage filter before it goes into our water softener. And then I have the RO filter.
Nice.
At the end of that.
James and Dylan, do either of you have RO systems?
Nope. We just use tap water. I've never had a problem with foaming. Never had a problem with anything really. There was a soft recall on 250 and 251 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even longer. It was when we tried Synergy in our Kitamura, because we like started noticing 250 going bad very quickly. And then when Synergy didn't work out, we talked to Qualichem again, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we didn't know you were having problems, but like we kind of soft recalled this, and here's a free tote to get you back up and running." And haven't had a problem since.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm not using any kind of system or anything. I know we're definitely not doing things right because we're literally just like got a hose hooked up to like a line in the shop and just like spraying in a bucket and mix it, dump it in. Like definitely not doing things right, but it seems to be working. So we had a guy from Qualichem stop in, but he was like literally like a coolant nerd. And like he was just spewing all this coolant info, and I was like, "This is crazy," and I didn't get a single thing out of what he said. So I'll deal with that at some later point, I guess.
If you're doing the bucket system, I highly recommend getting a drill paint mixer. You just like pop it in a DeWalt or whatever your brand is of paint mixer, and you use that to mix it, and it gets such better emulsion than just mixing it with the water.
Yeah, so the bucket is when I'm not feeling lazy. Most of the time, I just like take the hose and like out the back of the RoboDrill, like the coolant pours out the back. I just like spray it into the robo drill and it mixes as it pours back and out. So like it seems to be working fine. So I just cut the bucket out of the mix, and I don't know, it seems to be working fine. And we got the Royal Mist Collectors on it, got rid of those actual trash mist busters. And the Royal like reclaims so much of the oil, so we barely ever have to like actually put more oil itself in. That's when we'll use a bucket.
Are you an oil mixture instead of a coolant?
Maybe
Or
oil is not the right word. It's coolant, like, but like
okay.
the oil itself, like the quality
The
chem
concentrate.
itself. Yeah, yeah.
The concentrate.
I'm saying it
Yeah.
wrong.
I think they are still oils.
Yeah, it's oil.
It's just a
Yeah, but when I
mistable
think of
oil,
oil
whatever
machines,
the
I
term
don't
is.
think of like
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
a coolant machine.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask is, Dylan, are you the only one that has like a Freddy type machine?
Here?
Yeah. Do you have one?
I mean, I have one, yeah.
How often do you clean your tank out with it? Do you suck your tank out and
Whenever
filter
we
it out?
need to. It's not something that we have like a set date for right now. We just kind of keep an eye on the tank, and if there's scum stuff that we want to filter out, we'll do that. Very often, if I do plastics like Delrin or whatever, you know how it floats on the top of your tank, all the little fines, I'll go in and just quickly suck those out and filter them out. And then the Speedios, I would say their one big drawback is the chip management. So like the screens and the tanks let a bunch of fines through, and so your tank eventually becomes mostly fines, and you're like, man, I'm filling this machine like 3-4 times a week. What's going on? And then you realize you're like, oh, I've got 50% coolant volume in there, and then you go and suck it all out, and it's totally fine.
When we originally got the robo drills, I didn't understand that like the grid in the back lets chips through. So I kept having that issue where it's like, oh my gosh, like I fill the coolant and the gauge says it's up to the top, but like it runs out so fast. So we like took the grate thing off of it, and like the entire thing was just full of chips. Because like the sill worked sort of the same but different, but like it just didn't occur to me that chips were slipping through that on the robo drill because I never used one. So yeah, and then we got the Swarf Unlimited makes this thing where it's like a really fine grate that you could put in the thing, the robo drill, and like that catches everything, and we haven't had to empty it since. But
nice.
Yeah,
I overfilled one of my tanks because on the Speedios, the sight glass is in one of the side compartments that has filtering, and I didn't realize that I had so many chips in the center part that it had actually blocked flow to the sight glass area. And so it showed like just under a quarter, and I was like, "Oh, I got to add more." Like that's why the TSC pump is screaming, and I'm just adding and adding. I'm like, "It's not getting anywhere." And then all of a sudden, I just start seeing it come out of all of the cracks in the tank and start overflowing. I'm like, "Oh no!" So I learned that day.
yikes.
So this week I've literally been wondering why I'm filling my coolant tank so often recently, and it's not leaking right now. I'm going to go check it for chips later.
Yeah, they take up a surprising amount of volume. You would
For
not
sure.
think so, but yeah, they can really take up a lot.
Well, I want to get a Freddy or something like a Freddy in the near future to pump our tanks.
I don't think you can work with a better company than Freddy. I would buy one again in in no time.
That's good to know.
It is a fantastic machine, and then on top of it, Simon and everybody at Freddy is top notch. So I would highly recommend it.
They seem like an awesome company to buy from. They're definitely number one on my list.
Yeah, and everybody at Sanborn, who's their U.S. distributor, is also fantastic. I met them at IMTS this year. And we'll go for it.
I was just gonna say all their paint designs on all of them that I see online are awesome.
Yeah, but like the parts are easy and cheap to get. Simon told me, I think when he was on with Intolerance, that like they test those motors sucking dry and blind against a wall for like 24 hours. You know, it is so overbuilt. I never feel, if I'm sucking a bunch of coolant out or if I'm sucking a bunch of chips out, I'm never worried about anything burning out. Like the only thing you have to watch out for on the micro that I have is that you have to change the lever from suck to blow when you're blowing it back out into a barrel. And if you forget you're on blow and then open up the suck hose, it just starts going everywhere. And I've only made a couple messes that way. It's you learn pretty quickly.
I've done that with like a shop vac before, where
Yeah.
you plug it in the
Yeah.
wrong side and then just a dust cannon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's fantastic. I would buy the bigger tank if you can. Like I have the 100 liter, I think, and now they have one. It's like the 100 plus or something, and it's a little bit more because
So 100 liters, is that like 33 gallon or something?
you're around that
25.
20 something because it's what
A
3.8
liter's
gallons
basically
per.
a quart.
Yeah. So they have one that's slightly bigger than that. I mean, obviously, if you can fit the big one, the EcoVac, I think it is, and it's in the budget, go for that because you can suck in one side and then blow back into the tank at the same time. But I would get as much volume as you can.
Yeah, I was thinking of trying to get one that was around 55 gallons because then we could pump the whole Haas tank, and if we got a second 55-gallon drum that we could pump it into, we could pump the Doosan in two pulls.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Well, I think it's starting to get late, and we've taken enough time from Dylan and James. Dylan and James, would you guys like to do a plug for your business, podcasts, etc.?
Go for it, Dylan.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me at Proteum Mac, MACH, on Instagram, proteummachining.com, and then within Tolerance podcast as well. And just want to say, Chris, I beat you in time. I hit 2 hours and you didn't.
I was more tired that day.
My business is Cerven Solutions. You can find our website, cervensolutions.com, and it's terrible, but it's slightly getting better. So the website is a multi-year work in progress, always.
it's continuous improvement drawn out to the slowest increment.
Yeah,
I
it's
still don't
more
have a
like just
website, so-
continuous for the most part.
Discontinuous improvement.
Yeah, but it's getting there. We have some bright ideas, but we'll see if they ever happen.
Well, thankfully, in the machining world, I think a bad website means you're a good shop.
Definitely.
And we're in the middle of the outros. All right, guys. It's that time where we try to get our ducks in a row so we can say goodbye. Thanks for hanging out with us on this episode, on this special episode of I was about to say with intolerance, of Taps and Patience.
I did that like last episode, didn't I?
It would be a really special episode.
It's the crossover episode.
It's the crossover episode. So, anyways, thanks for hanging out with us. And this has been Harrison with Precision Ingenuity, signing out with AJ and from Audacity Micro, and our two guests, Dylan from Proteum Machining and James from Cerven Solutions. And yeah, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.